Hello, everyone. Hello. Oh, yes, I can hear myself. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second part of our virtual Bloom event. We're gonna hear now a presentation by Matt North. Probably everyone knows Matt North, and who doesn't, well, you will know him at some point. You will know him after that. So Matt has he's a coffee legend. He has over 2 decades experience in the coffee industry. He's working in coffee industry. He's a founder of co-owner of Coffee Press Court. And he's also QC and logistics for raw material, green coffee importer. He wrote a book, Coffee and Other Field Guide, and he has done quite a lot of work with UK SCA chapter. So many people met him during tournaments, during all sorts of events in UK. He's all around amazing person, and yeah, well, and now I would like to just give space to Matt. After the presentation, I'm gonna take it back. But I want to just say that if you can write all the questions that you have to Matt on here in QA section, and we'll ask the questions after the presentation. Okay, enjoy. Good luck, Matt.
Thanks, mate. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second talk in the Bloom today. It's gonna basically be a wide-ranging topic. So I got given the topic of the living wage, and it's impossible to address that topic without it being somewhat deeper than just living wage. It has to go into more than that. Before we start, it's worth noting that I am not an expert on this. I'm not. I am just been quite active in this sort of funding, and I've seen a lot of the industry over the past 20 years. So then nothing you're going to hear today is new. Nothing is behind a paywall. Everything is free to access. Everything you can go and find yourself and research yourself. So that's not an issue. There's nothing here that is protected from you. So you can find those information yourself. All I've done is ostensibly go and find that information, read it, and put it together in a way that hopefully you will understand and find relatively entertaining. So let's go. Cool. Follow the money. So a short explanation of the living wage and how it ties into the power dynamics within the coffee value chain. We have to expand it beyond living wage into how it is relevant and has context for us in coffee. Speaking of coffee and that context, why am I qualified in any way to talk about it? In essence, it's mostly because I've been around for a long time. Been around 20 years. There's my bio there and a picture of me gazing into the distance. I started off at Cafe Nero, so I've been on the commercial side of the business. I've sold hot chocolate and syrups. I've run my own cafe. I've run a chain of cafes. I've moved subsequently into the green world, so I'm acting as QC and logistics for Raw Material, which is a green company. So we produce, we import, we export. And now, as part of one of the co-owners of Full Court Press, now having sold half of it, I'm about to become a roaster. So in essence, I have feet in all ends of the industries. And when it comes to the living wage, it's really important to talk about the people at either end. It's impossible not to talk about the people at either end. So it has to be those who are producing the consumer product and those who are producing the raw product. And it's probably rare, but not unique, for someone to be in this position where they have a direct link to both ends from different entities. So some people will buy from producers and roast, so they have that direct trade ethos. It's not very often that many people will have a foot in both ends of the industry at that point. So that's why me, basically. I want to start with this. Where's the money? I beg your pardon, Commander. That's what my old sergeant used to say when he was puzzled, sir. Find out where the money is and you've got it half solved. I always wanted to fit a Terry Pratchett quote into a talk or a or a blog post. So this is a character, Sir Samuel Vimes, who is pretty much a socialist, written by Terry Pratchett as, some would say, the echo of his ego. And Pratchett was easily the widest person I've ever met. At the time, he was just like a dude in a cool black hat who happened to be a friend's dad. But then I was 12. So it's not surprising I didn't recognize how wise he was at the time. But it speaks, I think, to a core issue in life in general, but within our industry. Finding where the money is in that wealth distribution is a huge step in solving the problems. So let's keep this in mind. Where's the money? We need to find where the money is, and we'll come back to it later on. But the living wage. So how do we define it? How do we define the living wage? That is tricky. It's not a minimum wage. A minimum wage is legally mandated. That is something that has to be paid and represents, in some ways, a labor cost floor. So the minimum you can pay for labor in a country. And this is tricky. This gets into sort of all sort of economic problems. It's also not to be conflated or confused with the poverty line. So a lot of times people will assume the living wage is literally what you should get paid to survive, to live. That's dangerously and perilously close to the poverty line. So that really is more about subsistence than anything else. So this happens all the time. It's a real common point of confusion. And one of the issues with defining what a living wage is. This definition comes from the Global Living Wage Coalition. The Global Living Wage Coalition is a collaboration between sustainability standard organizations. So Fairtrade, Rainforest Alliance, the ICIL Alliance, and many more. They all got together to review a definition and sort of agree on a common definition by reviewing like 60 to 70 different definitions from nations, NGOs, constitutions, declarations of rights, all these sort of things, to come together with a common definition of what a living wage is. And that is this: the remuneration received for a standard work week by a worker in a particular place, sufficient to afford a decent standard of living for the worker and her or his family. Elements of a decent standard of living include food, water, housing, education, health, care, transportation, clothing, and other essential needs, including provision for expected events. Other essential needs are often include healthcare and access to information. But this now is accepted, pretty much. I mean, the International Labour Organization, which is the oldest specialist agency within the UN, founded in 1919. In 2011, there was a review of labor rights worldwide, and the UN basically accepted this definition as a consensus for what a living wage is. Now that's all well and good, but that really only serves one side of the value chain. So we need to know, how do we define a living income? Because the smallholder farmers that are a huge proportion of people who produce our raw product, they don't get paid a wage. They need to make an income. So there's a definition now of a living income as well. And this comes from the Living Income Community of Practice. Now, this is another group of cooperative sustainability organizations. ICIL is involved. Also Sustainable Food Lab and GIZ, which is the amazingly named Deutsche Gesellschaft Institut für Zusammenleben. I can't remember that now. Zusammenarbeiten, that's it. But anyway, they are all involved in trying to improve and increase the quality and the standard of life for smallholder farmers the world over. So they built on the work of the Global Living Wage Coalition and came up with this. Living income is the net annual income required for a household in a particular place to afford a decent standard of living for all members of that household. Seems fairly obvious. It gets a little more tricky when we start to look at smallholder producers will be employing people. So they will need to make a living income, but also earn enough to pay a living wage to the people they're employing. We'll come back to this in a minute. But first, history. This is not a new problem. Just going to say, as long as we've had commerce, the inequitable distribution of wealth in any system has been apparent. Ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle, you might have heard of those two guys. Them and amongst others, they argued for a responsibility to the state for assuming that the poor have a sustainable living. We keep seeing it cropping up again and again and again whenever social justice issues, as we would now know them, are discussed. In the Middle Ages, we have Thomas Aquinas, a 12th century Italian friar. He argued for just wages, but these were linked to just prices. So just prices were prices which allowed everyone to access necessities. So you had that simple idea that food and access to health kind of thing wasn't priced too highly for the poor. It keeps cropping up. Another 500 years pass, and we get to a real key, a watershed moment, a paradigm shift, if you want to, where we have the wealth of nations. John Smith is a Scottish economist and moral philosopher. He is around at the time of the Scottish Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, and he publishes The Wealth of Nations, which is a fundamental text in classical economics. It redefines and sets the course of economics for the next 150 years. In many ways, it's almost like Newton's Principia. It's a turning point in how we view economics. And it would be for centuries going forward. He recognized in what is an incredibly long book and had influence that echoes down the ages, that real wages led to the improvement in the circumstances of the lower ranks of people. And because of this, they're an advantage to society. It's an incredible leap forward from where we were, and it influenced so many, including Marx and Engels for Das Kapital. So the link to living wage and socialism and a different, non-capitalist way of thought is already beginning to get entrenched. We keep moving forward, and in the late 1800s, this work influences the early trade unions. A trade union in Dewsbury in Yorkshire challenged this doctrine of supply and demand, so challenged the established capitalist and economic thinking, and then started to espouse the doctrine of the living wage. Moving forward, we then now get the Catholic Church being involved. So Pope Leo XIII issues a papal bull. Now, a papal bull is basically an edict. It's a letter that goes out to every functionary in the Catholic Church. And it is an interesting one. So Rerum Novarum, it does address the condition of the working classes, but also it supports free capitalism and private ownership and rejects socialism. So it sits awkwardly between approving of trade unions and of collective bargaining and rights for the poor, but allowing those who have wealth and the free market to continue to operate. But even so, at this point in 1891, this is a major theological step forward. And this bull is actually it's the cornerstone of modern Catholic socialism, basically, and socialist thinking, which is kind of crazy to see that happened. And then we get to 1894, when we see the first treatise on the living wage, and actually probably the first mention of the living wage, and that was from an MP also from Yorkshire. The living wage must be sufficient to maintain the worker in the highest state of industrial efficiency with decent surroundings and sufficient leisure. And there we see they're going beyond surroundings. There has to be a quality of life involved as well. Fast forward another 100 odd years, and we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, just after the Second World War. 48 of the UN member states at the time signed it. There were only 52, so it was quite small, but it's getting there. Everyone who works has the right to a just and favourable remuneration, ensuring for himself and for his family an existence worthy of human dignity. It's a declaration, not a treaty. So no one was held to this, which is an issue. Despite that, research has shown that since 1948, over 90, which is a crazy number, national constitutions since that point, which seems like a lot to come into around it, they've all been influenced either directly or quite indirectly, or taking influence from the form. So this idea of a living wage actually exists in the constitutions of quite a few countries around the world. How is it calculated? It's great. How do we know what it is? So the anchor methodology. This is the methodology that's a multi-channel approach to estimate a living wage. It consists of two parts. So first off, we estimate the costs. So what does it cost to have a living wage at a standard of decency? Secondly, determine whether the living wage is paid. And so the anchors, Richard and Martha, actually have a long history in this field. Richard with the ILO and Martha with the WHO. They both hold, I think, doctorates or MBAs. So they work together with a few other of the organizations in the Global Living Wage Coalition to come up with what is now the accepted way of calculating the minimum, the living wage. It requires a lot of transparency of data. So it's not something you can just do from a broad picture. You have to get down on the ground, speak to the local and national level. You have to have access and transparency to data and real-time data because it needs to be updated. Because the last thing you want to do is to have something that is out of date. And really all the living wage does is it ensures it replicates poor living conditions. Two key things you can see from here when we're calculating the cost of a basic but decent life is the cost of food, cost of housing, and they're the two big ones. So the cost of food, this is based around WHO nutrition standards. Now, yes, they are potentially lower than we would, many of us would think, but it's a low-cost nutritious diet that's accessible and able to be bought in each country. So they will go and they will look at the calorific data, the intakes, and then look at what's being bought locally, compare that with real-time baskets, and make sure that the data is correct. The same thing happens for housing, and this is done to UN Habitat and national standards to show what is a decent housing. And this is access to sanitation, separate rooms for family members, separate rooms for sleeping and eating, a roof, running water, sanitation, all these sort of things. The things that a lot of us would take for granted. These are viewed as decent housing needs. They do this in conjunction with governments and local stakeholders, and then they come up with the living wage. It includes payroll and deductions, so there's the gross and net amounts. In the UK, and now in about another 10 or 15 countries, this is done by something called the Minimum Income Standard, which is done by the Centre for Research and Social Policy in Loughborough. The calculation shows a full breakdown of what your expected expenditures are, and I believe I have included it. So minimumIncome.net, I believe, is a calculator online, and it will adjust quite simply for your circumstances. So are you single? Are you married? Do you have kids? If you have kids, it includes childcare as an essential need. It does include a small amount for socializing and alcohol budget because it seems that this is part of a decent life, but not a lot. I think it's like £10 a week for alcohol. But as you can see, it's a real complex system to try and do, and it involves an enormous amount of high-level thinking. That's a lot. Here's a quokka. 15 minutes all has passed. You can't concentrate for that long. Quokkas, concentration break, marsupial, native to Western Australia. They are great for selfies, as you can tell. This one loves to eat a leaf. But they're also now a vulnerable species. So we should probably help them if we can. Anyway, everyone ready? Let's move on.
Hello, guys. Wow, that's oh, sorry.
Hey, Bartosz, we're not done.
Oopsie.
That was halfway through, buddy.
Yeah, so, I thought that you will, speed it through. Anyhow, sorry.
No, I put it in halfway to break the concentration because you can't concentrate for that long. So we have a quokka. Let's move on. That's great. So we know how it's created. We know what it is. We know the history of it. How do we place it in context in coffee? Because that's what we're involved in. So how do we place the living wage and the income in context for the coffee value chain? And this is really key. So one of, I guess, almost a personal hero. I've read a few things by him now, but one of the key drivers for information in this field at the moment is Stefano Ponte. He's a professor of international political economy at the Copenhagen Business School. Multiple books have been written by him on the coffee value chain and the dynamics of global marketing and how it comes in. His 2001 report is very, very, very good. Now it's 20 years old, but it's incredible for what the information you can get out of it. what we get from this, we can see really clearly. So the graph shows you distribution of income along the value chain. So in the 70s, 53% of value added remained in producing countries, with 20% going to producers. Cool. Fast forward to 1995, 22% now of value added remains origin. So we've lost at origin 21, 25%, which is an awful lot. The producer share hasn't shrunk as much, but it's still shrunk down to 13%. Keep that in mind. 5 years later, in 2001, the green coffee price had halved, but yet the retail coffee price in the US had dropped by only 4%. Now, the implication there is that an awful lot of money is being made somewhere. Just going to let that think on that one. And that was 20 years ago. So 20 years, we have not seen that price rise. We all know about the coffee price crisis. We have not seen that issue that issue be solved. So that wealth divide has widened. And that wealth divide means that the profit is stopping at some point, because we haven't seen wages rise for baristas to a sustainable level. So there is definitely a point where the money is stopping. The wealth is collecting somewhere. Green prices remain low, producers' costs have risen, and the prices that we are resulting in have been below the cost of production. This is a huge topic, and it's not one that we can cover in too much in today, but it's worth touching on because it does have an impact on the living income. 2019, we saw the publication of the Price Crisis Response Initiative by the SCA. Now, that was a look at addressing the interventions that could happen within the current system. As we saw from the fact that this is still, it's still a problem that we've had for 2,000-3,000 years. The system hasn't changed. So maybe it's we're thinking that this is not worthwhile trying to change the current system, that the SCA's PCRI is doomed to fail. But the work has to be done. We have to have some work at trying to change what exists at the moment. At some point, if we don't do anything, it's just nothing's ever going to change. So one of the things they did really identify was that inequitable value distribution is a root cause behind the current price crisis. So that would imply that the actual problem with inequitable value distribution is cyclically affecting the coffee price and driving the coffee price down, which is making the wealth distribution worse, and it feeds into itself. Something that ties into coffee as well, and is worth thinking about, is something called externalities. Now, externalities are benefits incurred by a third party without choice. So they are essentially the welfare state. So if you get housing benefit, if you get food benefit, food stamps, this is an externality. You have not chosen to take this, but it's a benefit you've incurred because it is there. We see this in the coffee value chain, and we see it as this idea of trade, not aid. It's a lot of these benefits, these aid programs, are not chosen by the producers. These are externalities. These are choices not made by them. The difficulty here is that there are arguments. We heard it with Bernie in 2016, but this is based on current economic thinking. There are arguments that these act as subsidies for the companies. So the employers are empowered to pay lower wages because these benefits exist. It's an interesting way of thinking about it, and it doesn't take too much to understand that, especially when you look at some of the big companies who pay low wages to employees that are on benefits but then don't pay tax. So ostensibly, the employers are paying a subsidy to be employed. And this has a mirror, whether we like it or not, in the aid policies that we enact at Origin. All this means that global coffee sales have almost doubled since 2012, but that sustainable income that we all desire is pretty much still out of reach for producers and baristas. We worry that we will run out of coffee because producers don't stay in the game, and we worry that being a barista is not a viable career option. And it's both true. What can we do? What can we do? We're so small. But understanding the situation is key. So the power dynamics that govern living wage and living income, they're impossible to separate from the broader social justice issues. Power and wealth is concentrated. And at a basic level, we need those in power and those with the wealth to commit to paying higher wages and higher cost prices. It's also with a view of the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial inequality we're seeing come to the fore the world over. Low pay disproportionately affects Black, Asian, minority, ethnic workers. In the UK, that's 18% being in low paid work. And this is seen over and over again. Every country we can find data for, we see these similar statistics. And across the gender gap. So we see that Black women in the US are the lowest paid of all the groups, of all the ethnic and gender groups. So it's impossible to separate out this desire for the living income, living wage from the broader issues. But then how do we as a small person have an impact? Well, we all have an ability to make an impact. Some of us are equipped to make macro changes. Some of us are equipped to go and talk to NGOs and talk to governments and try and influence policy. Some of us are not, but micro changes matter as much as macro changes. If you're a barista or you're a shift leader or you run a cafe, you can do the simple thing of advocating for a living wage within your business. You can pay a living wage within your business. These things are not hard to do, but they require a choice to be made. Because it's self-evident that there is money in the system. The global industry makes enormous profit. We see 6-figure bar bills. We see 7-figure roastery bills. Ostensibly, this is money built for and that's our as an industry, our own gratification. We do not need to spend that money on that. We justify it by need and marketing, but do we need it? These are choices we make. We choose to spend money here rather than elsewhere. No one is forcing this decision upon us. At the end of the day, the baristas who are here now, you are the future of this. You are the future people who will move into positions of power and wealth. You will move up the chain, and you will have the power to impact change. I'm doing everything I can. I'm not gonna have many more years in this. You're gonna have the power to make this change. So educate yourself, know your rights, make the change. I'm done.
Amazing, thank you, Matt. That was so insightful, and I love how you I just check if you did philosophy but you actually did science, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing how your methodology of how you started, how it all started with the living wage and the standards. And I just want to say that Matt did something quite amazing. He did full transparency of how he's running his full cold press cafe. And sorry. And that was.
Do you want me to talk about that, Bartosz? Right before we get
we have a few minutes, and that was really interesting. It was the first business I ever seen doing something like that, And then here is him talking about living, doing a change and really leading.
Here's the thing we do on the local level, on a very personal level. So when we have the cafe, everyone is on a salaried wage. Nobody's working for hours. We've recently gone to 4-day weeks. So you do your 37, 40 hours, but you do it in 4 days. So you have 3 days off, you do 4-day weeks. There's no worry about arguing over 0-hour contracts, or arguing over shifts and wages. Everyone has stability in knowing what they're earning, and that earning is set at what the business can afford. So it's definitely above minimum. It is currently above what is assessed to be the national or the living wage in the UK, but intrinsically is what the company can afford, and we back this up by publishing our P&Ls. So on numerous occasions, we've shown that the company has always either just about breaking even, or made a tiny bit of profit, and that tiny bit of profit has always been invested back into the company because there are things we need to buy to keep it going. And the wage bill runs periodically between 33 and 37%. So quite a high margin. And generally what people agree is not a profit-making business. But the goal isn't to make a lot of profit. The goal is to promote people and to bring them through. So in that respect, all we've got to do is stay open and pay everyone enough to live a life.
Okay. We have two questions here. One with one from Jesse May, and the second one from Stuart.
Okay.
I just lost the questions where they are. Jesse, guys, can you repeat the questions? Sorry, Jesse and Stuart. I published them, and they are published. Okay. So from Stuart, as a business owner, can you speak to how to livable and manageable your own income? I mean, has been over the years of running cafe. Were you able to pay yourself as much as your own baristas even? I know that
in the very early days, no.
They were earning less than baristas.
Yeah, in the very early days, no. And frequently, my pay would come last. So if we had to balance the books, we had to make sure the baristas got paid. I would get paid like 2 weeks later when there was cash flow. But also, I have a family, so I could not be paid. So from the very beginning, Full Court Press had to, when we started, it had to pay me a salary. That was just in the most efficient way possible. And then once we were up and running in a position where we were busy enough to pay myself a salary, it was actually, I think when I left, I was on 20K running it. And I think the staff were at that point probably on like 18 odd. So not a huge gap. But yeah, we always managed to pay ourselves somehow, basically.
So yeah, it's a big message to all people who wants to start a cafe, and I meet a lot of people like that, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna start a cafe and make a lot of money, and everyone gonna be. It's such a difficult business, and
it is a very difficult business to be in, and ostensibly people go into it want to make money, and they find that they have to cut costs, both in wages and raw material. Yeah. So the two things that we know that we shouldn't cut, the people getting paid at either end of the value chain, that's what gets cut.
Yeah. So if you want to invest in the good products and provide good service and pay your employees like okay money, decent money to live, it's super difficult. I have another question from Jessie May, and she's asking for a hurdles or fears for business approaching giving their employees a living wage. What do you think would be the hurdle or fear for businesses approaching giving their employees a living wage?
I think it will be rooted in the fact that they can't afford it. And a lot of that at they say, if you're a small cafe, the fear will be that you can't raise prices enough to pay for it. Because there is an implied glass ceiling on what we can charge for coffee. We do not believe that we can charge enough for coffee. FCP, we put the price up every 10p every year for all drinks, and it's risen now 7 years in a row. It's going to go up 10p again next year, and that goes in line with a pay rise every year for the staff.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's if the market is predicting everything gonna be raising, that's the normal thing. TFO is putting.
And that's it. So I think the hurdle to people doing it is they don't believe they can charge enough money, or they don't believe they will survive. When in reality, if you commit to paying that wage, your staff will be more efficient. They will be more minded to come in and earn money. They won't necessarily have to find a second job to support themselves, making them less able to work well for you. And then you will find that people will pay the money. Yeah,
I truly believe. I think that coffee should be much more expensive than it is right now.
There's a question here in the chat from Susanna about traceability tools. I meant to guarantee higher prices for coffee. Tools like iThinker. I mean, will they make a significant difference for the baristas and producers for living incomes? I mean, tools like that won't impact baristas. So these are purely aimed at they're actually purely aimed, for my money, at communication. They're marketing tools primarily. So it's a way to show traceability. And if you're trying to show traceability, 9 times out of 10, you're trying to communicate to the customer that you're doing something worthy. And you're saying, oh, we buy our coffee, and if you want to find out where it comes from, click on the thing, bam, here's where the coffee comes from. There's no guarantee that using that tool will result in higher prices. But transparency should create an almost peer pressure environment to pay more for it, because people will see what you're paying. This raises all sorts of consent issues. So, like, should we be sharing the price we pay producers? There are competition issues involved with that. There are consent issues involved with that. It's a very wide, again, another big hole to drill down. Are they guarantee higher prices? I don't believe so. I believe they're a tool that could result in higher prices. I do not think they guarantee higher prices.
Right. Yeah, I think Tim Windlebaugh was first to actually start publishing his prices that he paid for coffee, for some of his coffees, and that was quite good. As you said, is a primary marketing tool, but also I think because it's steering discussion, and hopefully we can start paying more than 10%, living in the country of origin is more than 10%. But as you said, it's a different discussion. It's completely for another day. Matt, thank you very much. That was
Bartosz, there's one. Have we got time for one quick question?
Oh, there's the new
I'll rattle through it.
Go for it.
Do you feel there's much in the co-op system for cafe? So to be a cooperative, by the sounds of it, that's where we're working. I think there is a lot to be said for communal ownership. A chain of cafes in Cleveland, Phoenix, have recently pushed towards that. Doing that empowers your staff, and because then they're not your staff, they're your co-workers. They become co-owners, and so there is a power in that. We see it in the UK, in several large companies, and how that can work. Can it work for the cafes? I believe it can. It takes a lot for owners to give up that position. I think it would be great for this to go that way. I feel for FCP, what will happen is I will transition almost out of it, and what will happen, the ownership will pass to a group of the current baristas. And whether that goes to all of them, I don't know. But it's a discussion to have. But I think it can definitely have benefits.
Right.
I think that's it.
That's it. Thank you, Matt, again, guys. I think Matt gave us some really deep insight how to do ethical business. How to ask yourself a question: how you want to run your businesses. And yeah, super exciting. Thank you again, Matt. Now we're gonna go to the coffee break, and this coffee break is sponsored by Union. We will have a small short video. So that's Edita Hodarsevich. I don't know, probably most of you know Edita. She's head of quality for Union hand roasted coffee, and she's SCA. She did all the professional courses in brewing, sensory, and roasting. She's also judge for sensory for World Barista Championships. Absolute legend, super nice person. You should all meet her. Again, thank you very much, Matt, and let's continue after the break.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
guys.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Bloom 2020. I hope you're enjoying it so far, and we're very pleased to be part of this both as the SEA chapter but also as Union. My name is Edita and I'm an education coordinator for the chapter. I also work for Union Hand Roasted Coffee as the head of quality, and we're gonna share some of the new exciting coffee with you, so I hope you are going to enjoy it, or maybe you've already brewed the coffee. So if you did, please let us know what you thought about it. In the meantime, let's just brew. So the coffee that we are sharing with you is from El Salvador. The farm is called Diamante and it's owned by Leopoldo Mouchant. The Diamante is one of the 3 farms that he owns, and he's doing an incredible job by cultivating Bourbon, Pacas and Pacamara. So the coffee you have in front of you, or maybe you have, or I definitely do, is a mix of Bourbon and Pacas. It's a naturally processed coffee, and on the farm, coffee is being dried on the raised beds to sort of get a nice and even drying throughout. So yeah, this coffee is actually part of our Christmas blend, which you might find on our website if you fancy that. And also a bit later on it will be available on its own. So if you are a fan of natural coffees, you probably know that they are kind of famous for great body and sweetness, and usually could be polarizing, but I think if you like it, you'd really enjoy a cup of that. It's really balanced, sweet, rounded. It tastes quite Christmassy. I mean, nothing to do with marketing here, but it has notes of cranberry, blood orange, and it has very rich and smooth chocolate truffle finish. So I'm just gonna add the last drops of water here and wait for it to be brewed. So as you see, I've used V60, no particular reason for that, just casual brewing. It would be interesting to hear how you guys brewed it and what you thought. You've got maybe enough coffee for a couple of brews, so give it a go on the different methods and share your feedback with us. I'd be very interested to know what you think.